A tourist crossed the line, mocking a royal guard and humiliating a war veteran, believing his money gave him the right to do anything. But the guard's response left the crowd stunned in awe. What happened next turned the entire day upside down. Let's start from the beginning. The morning drizzle seemed determined to wash away the enthusiasm of the tourists gathered outside Buckingham Palace. Yet, there they were, umbrellas in one hand, cameras in the other, eagerly jostling for the perfect shot. Guardsman James stood motionless at his post, every inch the stoic guardian of tradition. His red coat was pristine, his iconic bearskin hat perched perfectly atop his head. To most, he was a statue, a symbol, a photo op. But to James, this was duty, a proud legacy carried out with honor. The crowd, however, didn't see centuries of tradition. They saw entertainment. "Yo, mate, you awake in there?" a young man shouted, brandishing a selfie stick like a scepter. His friends roared with laughter as he leaned in, his phone inches from James's face. "Bet you can't even blink," another chimed in. "Come on, give us a smile, Big Ben." James didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed, his jaw set in quiet defiance. But the tension in his shoulders betrayed the weight of enduring this farce day after day. "Guys, watch this," a woman in a bright pink jacket exclaimed. She wove through the crowd, her phone aimed like a weapon. With exaggerated care, she reached out toward James's bearskin hat. "Oh, it's so fluffy. Do you think it's real?" she giggled, turning to her friends. "I'm totally putting this on TikTok." The crowd erupted in laughter, phones raised high to capture what they hoped would go viral. To them, James wasn't a person. He was a prop in their personal circus. As James stood firm, his peripheral vision caught a figure on the edge of the chaos. A man in a wheelchair, metals gleaming against his weathered jacket. A veteran. His sunken eyes carried the weight of battles fought, sacrifices made, and a nation he once served with pride. The old man sat silently, his gaze fixed on the scene unfolding before him. His expression, a mix of sadness and disbelief, spoke of volumes, but the tourists didn't care. "Hey, Grandpa," one of the louder men hollered, pointing his camera at the veteran. "Smile for the camera. You're part of the show too, right?" The veteran's face tightened, his lips pressing into a thin line as he turned his head away. James felt a surge of anger rise within him. He was trained to endure jeers, to stand tall against taunts. But this was different. The humiliation of a man who had given so much for the very freedom these people abused, it was almost too much to bear. Another tourist, emboldened by the crowd's laughter, crouched down near James's feet, flicking a coin toward his boots. It clinked against the stone with a hollow finality. "Do a trick, mate. Dance for us or something." The man jeered, arms spread wide like a ringmaster, commanding a reluctant performer. The crowd roared, their laughter mingling with the steady patter of rain. Yet not everyone was amused. A few bystanders exchanged uneasy glances, their smiles fading as they noticed the veteran's reaction. A woman near the back murmured, "This is a bit much, don't you think?" James's grip on his rifle tightened. He had faced worse. Training drills in the freezing rain, hours of standing at attention under the blazing sun. But there was something particularly grating about today's spectacle. It wasn't just the disrespect toward him. It was the casual cruelty, the way these tourists treated sacred traditions and human dignity as mere punchlines. The tension reached a breaking point when the loudest tourist stepped over the white boundary line meant to keep the public at bay. "What's the big deal?" he called out, shrugging at the onlookers. "It's just a line. What are you going to do, arrest me?" For a fleeting moment, the crowd hushed, their eyes darting between the man and the silent, unmoving guardsman. James remained still, but his gaze sharpened, a subtle yet powerful shift that sent a ripple through the onlookers. The rain seemed to fall harder, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. The rain had picked up, drumming on umbrellas and pooling in uneven cobblestones. But the drizzle did little to dampen the chaotic energy of the crowd. The tourists, emboldened by their numbers, seemed to grow louder, their actions more absurd with each passing moment. "Hey, maybe if we toss coins, he'll do a trick," one young man hollered, flipping a small coin toward James's polished boots. The penny landed with a faint clink, spinning briefly before settling in a puddle. Laughter erupted, and more coins followed. For them, James wasn't a soldier. He was a living novelty, an accessory for their day out in London. James remained still, his grip tightening on his rifle. This wasn't the first time he'd been treated like a carnival act, but today the stakes felt higher. He couldn't quite place why, until his gaze flicked back to the veteran. The man in the wheelchair, a living testament to sacrifice, sat hunched under a thin coat. His metals, meticulously polished, glinted under the gray light, but his posture spoke of defeat. Watching the scene before him seemed to chip away at his pride, piece by painful piece. "Hey, old-timer," came a loud, sarcastic voice from the crowd. A younger tourist, camera in hand, pointed directly at the veteran. "Where'd you get those medals? eBay? Or are they part of the costume too?" A few chuckles rippled through the group. It was the kind of laughter that makes you want to cringe and look away, but somehow no one did. The veteran flinched, his shoulders trembling as he turned his face to the side, hiding what everyone could see, the glistening streak of a single tear. At that moment, James's stoicism cracked, not visibly, but deep within. He had endured taunts, mockery, and even physical attempts to provoke him, all for the sake of his duty. But seeing a man who had given everything for his country reduced to this? It was beyond tolerable. The loud tourist, clearly reveling in the attention, decided to double down. He stepped closer to the veteran, his voice dripping with mockery. "Seriously though, what war did you win? The war on tea and biscuits?" Before anyone could react, James moved, not abruptly, not with anger, but with a deliberate step forward that commanded attention. The crowd stilled, their laughter dying mid-breath as the imposing figure of the guardsman loomed larger. James raised his rifle slightly, pointing the bayonet toward the white boundary line separating the public from the guard's space. His voice, calm yet thunderous, cut through the silence. "Step over that line," he said, his tone sharper than the blade, "and you'll explain yourself directly to the Crown." The tourist froze, his bravado evaporating under the weight of James's unblinking stare. A few nervous chuckles escaped the crowd, but the tension was palpable. The young man took a shaky step back, only to misjudge his footing and slip on the slick pavement. He landed squarely in a puddle, a loud splash punctuating his fall. The tables turned in an instant. The same crowd that had egged him on now erupted into laughter, this time at his expense. Phones shot up to record the moment, a digital justice of sorts. "Serves him right," someone muttered. James, ignoring the commotion, turned his attention to the veteran. Breaking protocol entirely, he stepped forward and lowered himself onto one knee. The sight was striking, a symbol of tradition and discipline, bowing to honor the sacrifices of another. "Sir," James said, his voice steady yet tinged with respect, "we owe you everything. Allow me to escort you to a safer place." The veteran blinked, his watery eyes meeting James's with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. He nodded, his voice too choked with emotion to respond. James rose, gently grasped the handles of the wheelchair, and began guiding the man toward a covered area, away from the chaos. The crowd was stunned. Phones were out again, but this time they captured something different. Whispered admiration replaced the earlier jeers, spreading through the group like a wave. "Did you see that?" someone murmured. "He didn't have to do that. That's, wow." James returned to his post moments later, his expression as unreadable as ever. But for a fleeting second, the faintest hint of pride flickered in his eyes. The same couldn't be said for the loud tourist, who sloshed away from the scene, his face burning with humiliation. The veteran's trembling hand rose slightly in acknowledgement of James's offer. He nodded, his voice too choked with emotion to speak. James, ever composed, took hold of the wheelchair's handles with a steady grip. The act was simple, yet profound. A silent declaration that some traditions are meant to serve, not just stand. The crowd parted instinctively, forming a natural aisle as James guided the wheelchair toward the shelter of a nearby alcove. The buzz of smartphones and murmured whispers followed their every move. For the first time all morning, the cacophony of mockery and entitlement had been replaced by something unexpected: respect. But not everyone was willing to concede. The tourist who had slipped into the puddle earlier, now drenched and red-faced, attempted to claw back some semblance of dignity. "Well, it's just a bit of fun, isn't it?" he muttered, loud enough to hear, but not enough to meet anyone's eye. He glanced around, searching for support in the faces of those who had cheered him moments ago. What he found was silence. Then, from somewhere in the back of the crowd, a clear voice rang out. "Maybe stop embarrassing yourself while you're ahead." The comment hit its mark, and a ripple of low chuckles swept through the audience. Not mocking James this time, but aimed squarely at the man who had crossed the line, literally and figuratively. The tourist mumbled something under his breath and slunk toward the edge of the group, the distinct sound of his squelching shoes marking his retreat. And just like that, the power shifted. The collective gaze turned to James and the veteran, a moment of gravity shared between the two men that seemed to lift the air around them. As James carefully parked the wheelchair under the shelter, he crouched slightly, meeting the veteran's eyes. "Are you comfortable, sir?" he asked, his voice low but warm. The veteran nodded again, his expression softening. "Thank you," he murmured, barely audible over the rain. But the gratitude in his tone carried more weight than any applause. Speaking of applause, someone in the crowd started clapping. It was hesitant at first, almost unsure, but then another joined in, and another. Within moments, a ripple turned into a wave, and the entire crowd erupted into applause. James straightened, adjusted his rifle, and turned back toward his post. The applause followed him, growing louder as he resumed his place by the palace gates. For a fleeting moment, he paused. Then, in a gesture so subtle it could have been missed, he adjusted his bearskin hat with precision and purpose. Phones captured every second of the scene, and within hours, the story was all over social media. Videos of James kneeling to assist the veteran, the loud tourist's humiliating tumble, and the crowd's applause flooded news feeds. The captions varied, but the sentiment was unanimous. This is what honor looks like. A reminder that some traditions are worth preserving. Guardsman breaks protocol for all the right reasons. By evening, the videos had garnered millions of views, with comments pouring in from across the world. Some praised James's restraint and integrity, while others expressed outrage at the behavior of the disrespectful tourists. "This is exactly what we need more of, dignity and respect," one comment read. "Imagine mocking a veteran and thinking you're the funny one. Disgusting," added another. For James, the online storm was irrelevant. What mattered was the moment, a veteran's dignity preserved, a duty fulfilled. As the rain began to ease, he stood firm once more, his focus steady, his composure unshaken. Another tourist, less brazen than those before, stepped forward hesitantly. Instead of shouting or jeering, they simply raised a hand in a quiet wave of acknowledgement. Others followed, their gestures respectful, subdued. James didn't wave back, of course. That wasn't his role. But inside, as the drizzle subsided and the crowd began to thin, he felt a rare sense of satisfaction. For the first time in a long while, his duty didn't feel like mere routine. It felt like purpose,